Babelfish is here. CES 2025 kicks off with real-time translation earbuds. Need high-speed internet? Fly United. And has artificial general intelligence already occurred? Welcome to #Trending. I'm your host, Jim Love. Let's get into it. This Tuesday, we have another special edition of our interview program, Afterward. Today, we will have Zainul Maji, the president of TELUS Consumer Solutions, and she'll be talking to us about an issue with Canadian government regulation. If you're interested, just stay on after the closing credits. We don't do a lot of product promotion on this webcast, but when CES's 2025 in Las Vegas opened with a nod to science fiction made real, a company called Kettle was unveiling the W4 Pro earbuds, which was a modern take on Babelfish from Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or Star Trek's iconic universal translator. These earbuds break language barriers by providing real-time, two-way translation for phone and video calls, automatically in 40 languages and 93 different accents with a latency of just 3 to 5 seconds. This near-instant cross-lingual communication works seamlessly with any telecommunication app or traditional phone system. Users can even share one earbud with someone else to facilitate face-to-face translations, maintaining the same low-latency response. Powered by Kettle's Babel OS, the earbuds enhance the translation experience by anticipating dialogue, offering customizable lexicons, and capturing human emotion and tonality, making the dream of universal communication closer to reality. Beyond translation, the W4 functions as a standard Bluetooth earbud set for music and calls. They offer 6 hours of continuous translation and an extra hour of use after a quick 10-minute charge. Priced at $449 US, the earbuds are available now on Kettle's website and, we assume, the Bridge of the Enterprise. I'm sure you've noticed that it seems like everything you get in a flight is now an additional cost, from luggage to seat selection and even to use their painfully slow internet. So it was a bit of a surprise when United Airlines announced it would fast-track the rollout of SpaceX Starlink internet service across its fleet, aiming to bring high-speed connectivity to passengers as early as spring 2025. United plans to begin testing Starlink next month with its first commercial flight using the service on a regional aircraft expected by spring. The airline will complete Starlink installations across its entire two-cabin regional fleet by the end of 2025, with its first mainline aircraft going online by year's end. The service will be, wait for it, free for Mileage Plus members and offers uninterrupted streaming, gaming, shopping, and in-flight entertainment from gate to gate. And Mileage Plus is free to join, and members can also use miles for purchases, including seats and onboard services. But United signed a deal with SpaceX in September, marking the largest Starlink agreement in the aviation sector. The airline aims to become the first U.S. carrier to offer high-speed, low-latency internet across its entire fleet, ensuring a seamless in-flight experience on both seatback screens and personal devices. And did I say free? United CEO of Mileage Plus, Richard Nunn, said adding Starlink is going to revolutionize the experience of flying United. Yesterday, Sam Altman, CEO of OpenAI, teased the world with a tweet. He said, "I always wanted to write a 6-word story. Here it is. Near the singularity, unclear which side." Now, it is clear that OpenAI is moving fast towards a future that may go beyond AGI, artificial general intelligence, the idea that an AI can be as smart or even smarter than a well-educated person. It continues to set its sights on what it calls superintelligence, AI systems that massively surpass human intelligence. The description of that event has borrowed a term from physics, the singularity, which essentially means an event or impact that cannot be measured. And truly, when AI systems massively surpass human intelligence, the impact can't be measured. It's the stuff of science fiction novels. But most experts believe it's sometime close in our immediate future. With that cryptic phrase, Altman has acknowledged that artificial general intelligence, where AI is smarter than a highly educated person, may have already been achieved. He said as much in a subsequent blog post. He said, "We are now confident that we know how to build AGI as we have traditionally understood it. We believe that in 2025, we may see the first AI agents join the workforce and materially change the output of companies. We continue to believe that iteratively putting great tools in the hands of people leads to great, broadly distributed outcomes." So, have you ever wondered why Altman is always being so cryptic? Is O3 the new OpenAI model that is supposed to launch at the end of January or early February AGI or not? Don't be cute about it. But there may be a really good reason. OpenAI is in a pitched battle with Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and a number of others to be the leader in artificial intelligence. Musk, a former friend and ally of Altman and one of the founders of OpenAI, is now doing everything in his power to hinder OpenAI's progress. He claims that you shouldn't be making a profit from AI. I'm sorry, I got to choke that one down because there's nobody who's more concerned with making a profit than Elon Musk, and he has his own AI that he's trying to sell right now. In fact, he's tried to lock down NVIDIA's production of its new GPU chips, and Musk has the money to do that. This would cause great pain for OpenAI, who started as a nonprofit and is trying to find a new structure where they can raise the tens and maybe hundreds of billions of dollars needed to keep moving forward. Now, despite its relative commercial success, with a growing number of corporate clients and retail subscribers, estimated at 300 million or more a week, OpenAI is rumored to be losing close to $45 billion in this year alone. And that's just operating losses. There's still tens of billions of dollars of investment needed to move this forward. But OpenAI has an ace in the hole, Microsoft. Its partner and a major funder, and we talked about this yesterday, is investing $80 billion this year into data centers and production facilities. If anybody can take on Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg, it's Microsoft. But Microsoft's deal with OpenAI has a limit. When artificial general intelligence is achieved according to their agreements, Microsoft loses its rights to access OpenAI technology. In the original agreement, the definition of AGI was left open to OpenAI to determine. Now, according to a leaked document, Microsoft and OpenAI have agreed that AGI would occur when it accounts for $100 billion a year in profit. So that's maybe why Altman may be playing cutesy with the definition. But it doesn't mean that AI won't have an enormous impact long before that occurs. Altman is suggesting that these AI agents will begin to materially change our business outputs as early as this year. OpenAI's latest model, known as O3, is raising eyebrows. The O3 model has achieved breakthrough results on what's called the ARC-AGI test. It measures how well an AI can adapt to entirely new problems without relying on past training. ARC challenges the AI to figure out the rules behind puzzles it's never seen before. Imagine being shown several examples of shapes moving or changing color based on hidden rules, and then being asked to predict the outcome of a new puzzle. For humans, this type of reasoning feels natural. It may be difficult for some, but it feels natural. But for AI, it's been a major barrier until now. The O3 model's success on ARC suggests it can generalize knowledge and solve problems in ways previously thought to be unique to human intelligence. This is either a critical step towards AGI, or it may even be the achievement of AGI. However, there are still significant gaps to close when it comes to efficiency. The human brain operates on just 20 watts of power. That's roughly the energy needed to power a light bulb. In contrast, running a model like O3 requires thousands of watts, and on a single task, it may use enough power to run an entire household for 2 months. But that's only one way of seeing the problem. If you express it in terms of cost, you might see this differently. A frontier model costs somewhere between, best estimates we can see, $17 to $20 per task in what's called a low compute mode. While that might seem expensive, it highlights how AI is becoming competitive in tasks that require advanced reasoning and problem solving, though with a much higher energy footprint. How many complex problems do humans solve per hour? And how much do we pay a human per hour? And O3 may solve another problem. We are running out of data to train these new models, not only because the vast amount of data that's available has already been used, but there are also legal issues and new barriers making getting what little new data they can find more difficult and more expensive. But a new model that can learn from situations it has not been trained on, well, that would constitute an incredible breakthrough. And in last month's 12 Days of Shipmas, do you remember that Altman and crew showed how they could already fine-tune a model? In other words, take that model from its training and add some new training to it with as little as a dozen new prompts? Combine that with O3's ability to solve new problems. So here's the bottom line. Altman may be afraid or limited in what he can call this new development, but the impact will be huge on all of us. And that impact is coming faster than we might think. Or, to put it as Altman did, near the singularity, it's unclear which side we're on. That's our show for today. Remember, stay tuned for Afterward, our interview show. This week we have Zainul Maji, president of TELUS Consumer Solutions. You can find links and show notes at technewsday.com or .ca, take your pick, and you can reach me at editorial@technewsday.ca. I'm your host, Jim Love. Have a terrific Tuesday. Welcome to Afterward. I did stories on this topic before Christmas, but I wanted to run this interview when everybody was back. Zainul Maji is articulate, intelligent, and she's got a point of view. We had a great conversation, and I wanted to share it with you. Check it out. Welcome to #Trending, Zainul.
Thanks for having me, Jim. Great to be here.
I want to thank you for joining us today. You've raised some interesting questions about a recent government ruling, at least, and it's a ministerial decision to reverse a CRTC ruling, I think is what would be fair to say. And I think it's also fair to say that you're absolutely opposed to the minister's decision. There's some strong language going so far as to call it overreach or picking winners and losers. But before we talk about that, can we just share with our listeners the context, what the CRTC decision was and how they got there in the first place?
Yeah, so maybe to make sure that we don't bore listeners, we're talking about internet services here and the fixed networks that they ride on. And if you think about it, there's layers of those networks. So there's connections that go directly to your house. Typically, every home has a cable connection and a telecom connection of some kind. So there's redundancy with those two connections. And then for the last 30, 40 years, there's been a framework where others that are not providing that regional service right directly to your house can share that last mile, can share that network so that they can also compete. So there's a delicate balance between ensuring that there's investment to every home and there's redundant investment and making sure that there's a strong competitive environment. And that's where the CRTC tries to play a balanced role. So since 2015, actually, the CRTC opened the idea that the fiber networks that telecommunications companies have built to compete with cable would start being opened up. And so in 2020, they came out with an interim decision to say in Ontario and Quebec, we had originally said they would be opened up, and now here's some interim rates. And then in 2024, in August, they had gone through a 17-month process and came out with a formal decision to talk about how those networks would be shared. What happened in between that is that there was an appeal to Cabinet on that interim decision, and Cabinet, post the final decision, responded to that appeal and said that they would like to essentially ask the CRTC to revisit that decision, because their view was that they need to revisit it for the larger players. And they named Bell, TELUS, and Rogers as large players in the market. which is really interesting in Ontario and Quebec because we have, as TELUS, the absolute lowest market share of any provider. We're very much a new entrant in Ontario and Quebec. Now, we would be considered a large player in the West where we've built our own networks. This concept of sharing networks to make sure that we don't dig up your flower bed 4 times and waste a lot of money for that last mile, that's really the intent of that ruling.
Is this all really last mile services they're talking about, or is this the sharing the fiber trunks themselves?
It's sharing the whole network, but a lot of what we advocated for was that if you wanted to compete after you got some customers, you should be providing that back end network and providing points of presence in each region. That starts to get complicated. It does make sure that those trunks ensure that they have great capacity and support. And it also makes sure that the providers are willing to make investments without disrupting consumers. But that's something we advocated for that the CRTC didn't adopt in their decision. So we didn't get everything we wanted in that final decision either.
It seemed rather strange, and I guess that the principle was sharing networks, and the small providers were all allowed in. I totally support that. I think competition is a wonderful thing, and that's a great thing. But to freeze out really, Bell is doing the complaining, so it's freezing out TELUS and Rogers from sharing. I don't see that as a strategy that one should pursue. I'm trying to figure out why the government would want to do that. It's not that you could say it was right or wrong, but why do they care?
We were very perplexed by this decision, but if you allow me just one point of clarification, Rogers wouldn't be excluded in Ontario, right? Because they already have a network.
Yeah, correct.
So they have a cable network. So really what this comes down to is excluding TELUS.
What was the rationale to do that?
The rationale to do that, and again, I don't understand it, and it very much surprised us. But the rationale we were given, and I explicitly asked, okay, so we have a policy mandate of competition, providing more choice, and driving affordability for Canadians. That's the policy. And now that's shifted to protectionism over certain competitors. And the answer was yes. That's the policy, is that the intent is to protect these regional players in the market. And that shocked us. And that's why we think it's really important to take a stand to say that Canadians deserve that option. We're not saying take our services, we're not perfect, but we want to compete. We're doing some really innovative things in the market, like bundling our internet with really great entertainment options and streaming services, or bundling our internet with ways to help you save energy in your home as rising costs of energy also have an impact on your bill. And we want to compete and we want to innovate. And those choices are up to the consumer, but we're being told that we should be excluded. And so who are we protecting? We're protecting, if you're a competitor in the current Ontario market, honestly, all of them want to keep us out, right? Bell filed the initial petition. Cogeco, others are saying, well, TELUS shouldn't be allowed on our networks. And we're talking about a policy that's been in place for 40 years. We're talking about the fact that anytime we would build an asset like a home security service, we're going to build it as a national asset and want to ensure that we can actually bundle those services for customers across the country. What we're being told is that in Ontario and Quebec, we could be excluded if the CRTC follows the direction that the cabinet has given them.
And the only rationale I can see in this, and we haven't talked to the minister, we're going to issue an invite for him to come on the program, certainly, but the only rationale I can see for this is them saying, you're a big company, TELUS, you can build your own fiber network. Do you have a position on that?
Sure. I think that let's think about the cost of doing that and why that's why I started with this policy that's been in place for 30 to 40 years, right? Because not every home or business has those dual connections that are high quality. So we should be focused on making sure that we're building out fiber to the areas that don't have fiber today. And out of the decision that came out, in 2024 in August, we were the only provider that said, even with this decision, we will continue to invest, and we will continue to invest in underserved markets in our core territory where it's more economic for us to deploy that infrastructure. If we want to compete outside of that territory, we should be given access the same way everyone's being given access to our network that we built and spent $7 billion building in Alberta and BC, and will continue to spend hundreds of millions of dollars expanding every single year. So that's the first rationale, is where should that investment really go? Should it be going to dig up your flower bed one more time, or should it be going to underserved communities? So that's the first element. The second element is, what's the best outcome for Canadians? I think the best outcome is to make sure that once we have two reliable connections to every home and every business, we're innovating on top of what are the services, what are the products, what are the capabilities, how to increase the capacity of those networks to give Canadians the best digital outcomes. I think that's where the CRTC is trying to come up with a balanced view of how to manage the investment profile and the competitive environment to good effect. And the 2024 decision, as I said, we didn't get everything we wanted, but it was a good balanced decision to achieve those outcomes.
So where does this stand right now? As I understand, the minister sent it back. There seems to be quite a quick turnaround on this.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of consultation going on that I could see. Did I get that right?
That's right. And by the way, there's an accountability as well for the cabinet to get lots of consultation before they issue an order like this. So that's one piece at play. But essentially, the CRTC has 90 days from November 6th in which to issue a response to the cabinet order. And remember, that cabinet order is on the interim decision, which was replaced by a formal decision. So this is very complicated, and we're trying to simplify it down to the brass tacks, which is TELUS will be excluded if the CRTC follows the federal order. And so they have 90 days to make that call.
Rogers shares your network out west, right?
Rogers would share, interestingly enough, they have their own network because they acquired Shaw. They are allowed to share our network in other areas, like on the wireless side. And part of this final CRTC decision, Jim, was actually, I think, a really good outcome for Canadians, because what it said is, if you're one of those two connections in that particular region, and so in some regions, in Alberta and BC, it's TELUS and Rogers, was Shaw before. In Ontario, it could be Rogers and Bell, or Cogeco and Bell. In Quebec, it could be Videotron and Bell. It's all regionally defined in terms of the infrastructure that's been built. But what the CRTC said in 2024 in August is, they said, if you're one of those two connections, you can't share with each other. So that really helps to ensure that both of those connections are going to be built, and everyone has an incentive to keep upgrading those two connections to every home and business. We advocated actually for that because there's areas in our market in Alberta and BC that don't have fiber yet. So there's some homes and businesses that don't. And for a long time, up until the CRTC made this decision in 2024, we could have used Rogers, but we didn't. Yeah, so I think we've been trying to do the right thing. We're really trying to get in here and compete and provide Canadians with a choice. And it was shocking to us that we are being excluded single-handedly.
Speaking of the underserved markets, a lot of people live in underserved markets. I happen to pay $150 a month to Elon Musk so I can get a decent bandwidth where I live. I get the most emails on this topic. How can we do better at serving underserved areas? And not just people like me or cranky, but Indigenous populations, people who can benefit from this. How can we do better than this?
This question, because we have a responsibility. And I've tried to say to any government who will listen, municipal, provincial, federal, that we've got to take a broader approach of how to solve this problem and bring our assets together to solve the problem. And a lot of times the feedback we get is you're a big company. You just care about your shareholders. And I'm trying to say, okay, but who are our shareholders? Our shareholders are the fourth largest shareholder is our employees. Our shareholders are Canadians and pension funds. And we're competing in an environment where all ships rise, and everyone that has digital solutions, internet connectivity has been the single largest driver of productivity in Canada in the last 30 years. So why don't we continue to build? So I think there's lots of solutions, Jim, and they should be domestic solutions so that we have reliable infrastructure that we own. And they are things like there's going to be some very hard to reach places. Let's decide if we should reach those through better wireless connectivity. Canada has the highest spectrum costs in the world.
Yes.
So we compete, we constantly get feedback that people are worried about their cell phone prices, and there's been a lot of disruption in that market. But if you think about all of the things that are required to build a wireless network and deliver service, we're a price taker, right? We don't own large OEMs globally. We're not Verizon. We're going to compete as best we can on the right pricing for equipment. But the one cost we can control is our spectrum costs. And in other countries, governments will give away spectrum to those who are going to build networks. So if we think about these hard to reach places, are there solutions like that that say, let's serve this through wireless, let's serve this through having subsidized wireline infrastructure? And the government is trying to do some of those things. But I think if we work together more effectively, we could do a lot better.
Look, the game in Canada is everybody hates telcos at one point or another. I think you're probably accustomed to that or whatever. But we need to get past this and start to work together to build the structures that are going to generate wealth for the next 50 years for our children. I guess the question is, with governments like this, you've reached out, where do you go from here if they don't listen?
I think we have to pursue all options we can to compete effectively, and we will, whether they're regulatory options, legal options, other options. As you've seen from the way we're approaching this, we're not sitting back. Telecommunications companies need to improve their brand and need to improve their delivery of service to customers, and we're trying to do that. As I said, we're not perfect, but we're really working hard every single day to make service better, more accessible, more innovative for customers. And I think we're just going to continue to fight that fight. I don't think there's any fairness or equity blocking specific companies from competing. So we're just going to continue pursuing that.
Yeah. I have you on the program, and I have prepared you for this question, but I do want to ask it, is I think we've discovered how brittle some of our infrastructure can be. Are there things we should be doing or looking at in planning that can make internet infrastructure more resilient? I've seen what's happened. The US has their telco networks are essentially frozen by hackers right now. Are there things we could do better in that aspect to try and keep our own networks as being more resilient?
Yeah, so I think at the core, there's the fiber infrastructure, which is so resilient. I can show you pictures of floods in BC that are where our network has been resilient in the face of that. We really do a survey of any fiber that we build and say, okay, what are the right things to do to make that infrastructure more resilient? I think what you're talking about more is with respect to privacy. And really with that, we're ahead of the curve from a TELUS standpoint in terms of advocating for privacy, in terms of advocating for the right technology to deploy and the upgrades that are consistently required to support our networks. And we have to be careful because this infrastructure is very critical, and we need to continue to create that environment, again, where there's this balance between being able to drive investment and being able to drive outcomes for affordability. One last thing I'll say is that when you share your networks, the other really important thing is what's the price at which you share them. So in the wireless sector, what's happened is the competition that's been invited on the MVNO ruling is pennies on the dollar for sharing those networks. But in the wireline side, these rates that are required to be charged to Bell for access to their network come with hundreds of dollars of investment per customer to ensure that you can install that customer and support that customer over time. You're building the infrastructure, but you are getting that wholesale revenue and cost recovery if it's not your end retail customer. So that's the other thing to think about in terms of how to keep this balance and how to keep the investment and the affordability intact.
So if someone out there in my audience is listening to you and saying, I agree, what should they do?
Please sign our petition, demand more choice on change.org, demand more internet choice. I think this is such an important issue. Like, I think about raising my own kids and telling them the prosperity of opportunities in this country, and how if you drive to compete and you do the right things, opportunities will open up. And so I think it's a really important issue for all industries, in addition to the fact that you need a stable regulatory environment to make the right investments and to understand like how you're going to compete. And when you decide to change those rules every few minutes, it really challenges any company's ability to make the right investment choices.
Yeah. And my wardrobe advisor, Red Green, would say, we're all in this together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We want the best outcomes for Canada, for productivity, for affordability, to level the playing field so that everyone can compete. And a lot of times that's digital access right now. So those are all the things that we're advocating for.
They should go to
Change.org, the common website for petitions, and it's demand more internet choice. And that is what we're trying to ask listeners and advocates, and really all Canadians who care about fairness and competition and affordability and the principles that we should want to compete in our businesses for the end consumer. I think everyone should sign the petition.
My guest today has been Zainul Maji, President of TELUS Consumer Solutions. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, and really hope that we can work together to fight this good fight. And please let me know if there's anything else that you can think of that we could do to win this.
We'll be in touch. And if the minister would like to come on and explain the decision, we'll send out an invite to him as well.
Great.
That's it. Let us know what you think about this issue. Love to hear from you. Check out the website, change.org, if you want to be in on this yourself. I'm your host, Jim Love. Thanks a lot.